Coming to you from a cozy little condo high atop Old Fourth Ward, Atlanta. Welcome to The Ron Show on America One Radio. Here's your host, Ron Roberts.
Again, coming to you this morning from a lovely little lake house at the Plum Branch Yacht Club. It's a facetious name, honestly. It sounds fancy. I promise you, it's RVs and mobile homes along Clarks Hill Lake in South Carolina. So just don't think that I'm like, hoity-toity gated community. No. This is very much RVs, mobile homes, and golf carts for those who have them. Anyway, thank you for allowing me to take a little bit of your time and for listening to The Ron Show, whether it's on the America One Radio app, AmericaOneRadio.com, whether it's on Progressive Voices via TuneIn or by podcast. I appreciate that nonetheless. So I planned on coming down here for a few days of rest and relaxation after a busy few weeks, not just following these helter-skelter campaigns and the whiplash changes that took place in the month of July and into August, but also I've just been super busy with real estate. And wouldn't you know, I come down here to enjoy a few days of rest and relaxation, and the real estate stuff just ramps up. I've been busy. I've probably been busier the last 2 or 3 days down here than I was before I left. So I don't know how much rest I got, relaxation I got in drips and drops here and there. But nonetheless, I'm grateful to my friends Angie and Bob for allowing me to have a little rest and relaxation, or at least the opportunity to get it at their lake house here at the Plum Branch Yacht Club. And I actually do feel a little more rested. There's something about getting out of the city and not hearing the noise. I like city noise, but I desperately like quiet too, and felt the need to just get out of the city for a few days, and I'm glad I did that. Got to enjoy nature a little bit. Life without air conditioning. I mean, don't get me wrong. The lake house here has air conditioning. I keep saying lake house. It's a mobile home. It has air conditioning, thank God. It's been brutally hot down here, and pretty much throughout southeast United States, brutally hot. And I'm looking in the forecast, and it looks like we're getting a good bit of relief of that next week. Hello, come on, autumn. I love fall weather. Love September. It's my favorite month of the year. Weather-wise, and also because college football kicks off. We got Georgia Clemson coming up Saturday. I'm really excited about that. If anybody has a spare ticket, needs a buddy to go with, hi, I'm Ron. But I'm just ready for college football. All right, here's what else I'm ready for. I'm ready for these next, how many days we have? 70-some days to just kind of get on by. This is going to be a grind. It's going to be a daily, what did he say? What did she say? And today, I want to review two things. First, I want to give you Mayor Van Johnson from Savannah, his speech before the Kamala Harris rally last night at Enmark Arena in Savannah. By the way, brand new arena, very nice. Well done, Savannah. About time you had one of those. My hometown of Augusta is getting a new James Brown Arena. That's right, the Godfather soul. They're getting a new James Brown Arena. In fact, they should, I believe, start demolition here pretty soon. So I'm looking forward to seeing Augusta step up and having a 21st century venue as well. So after we give a little taste of the Van Johnson speech, and there's really no point in giving you another taste of the Kamala Harris stump speech, because I honestly, I did not watch it, do not know. Maybe she's changed it, maybe she hasn't. I think it's more important for us to drill in on the CNN sit-down with Dana Bash, Kamala Harris, and Tim Walz. I am chock full of football analogies. I want to go over the game film, kids. Yeah, let's head to the locker room. We'll go over the game film. I actually have another football analogy I want to provide for you, and Falcon fans, you're going to kind of groan when I remind you of, I think, the deepest, darkest moment in franchise history, the 28-3 debacle. Trust me, just go with me on that. First things first, let's listen to Van Johnson, the mayor of Savannah, before the Kamala Harris appearance at the Enmark Arena yesterday. He was just giddy that she brought the bus tour to South Georgia, Southeast Georgia specifically. Let's listen in.
Make some noise, Savannah! First of all, I want to deal with something real quick. Yesterday, we had a Savannah police officer who was injured while escorting the Vice President's motorcade. And so I want you to keep him and his family in your thoughts and prayers. And certainly, big shouts out to the Savannah Police Department for all they do. I have the blessing of being the mayor of the greatest city on earth, Savannah, Georgia. And I'm proud to be your mayor because I know Savannah. I chose Savannah. I am a proud graduate of the Savannah State University and Georgia Southern University. And I have poured my heart and soul into the city. It means so much to me, and I know it means so much to you, that our Vice President, Kamala Harris, is here today in this building in the greatest city on earth. We have spent the last 2 days together in Liberty County, all right, in Sandfly, and of course, all the way around here in the hostess city of the South. This is their second time here in just 6 months. The first time in history that we've had a presidential nominee here in Savannah since 1990. And as Vice President, she has delivered for Savannah and coastal Georgia, and I know that Savannah and coastal Georgia will deliver her in November when Georgia puts her over the edge to become the 47th President of the United States of America. Just like Vice President Harris, my public service is guided by purpose, passion, and people. You have got to know who you're serving, why you are serving them, and then you have to give it everything you've got. Vice President Harris has invested in our communities. Savannah has benefited tremendously from the investments of the Biden-Harris administration. Y'all should show President Joe Biden some love as well. From investing millions of dollars into the Port of Savannah, shouts out to the working men and women of ILA 1414, 1475, and 2046, to investing in our roads from Macon to Savannah. The Vice President has shown that she cares about building up the middle class of our great country. She knows us, she understands us, and she gets us. In stark contrast, and I'm home so I have to keep it real, Donald Trump intends to tear down our progress. He will strip away the historic investments that Vice President Harris helped to secure, which led to the creation of over 450,000 good-paying jobs right here in Georgia. He will cut housing 1.9 million Georgia seniors and others on Medicare, hard won by Vice President Harris and our very own Savannah's own Senator Raphael Warnock. Beloved, we cannot afford to lose all of our progress. And frankly, I want a president that I can be proud of. I want a president that doesn't embarrass the hell out of me. I want a president that respects women. I want a president that's respected around the world. I want a president that believes that everyone matters no matter who they are, no matter where they live, no matter who they love, no matter what their tax bracket is. And I want a president who doesn't believe in black jobs. I want a president who believes everybody should have a job. And my friend, that president is Kamala Harris.
So as you can hear, the audio source that I had is mostly from inside the arena and not wired right into the microphone. So you really got, it sounded like you were in there, right? And then we had a little audio drop, but Van Johnson continued and rapped with this.
Presenting our country with a new way forward, a joyous future where every American, every American, you, every American is represented. Now, Georgia, because I got to go. Georgia, we got our work cut out for us. We have done it before, and we could do it again. For the next 68 days, everybody say 68. We need to hit these streets and mobilize. For the next 68 days, we need to knock on doors and talk to our friends and our family and our neighbors and fight for our freedoms. For the next 68 days, we're all in. And we're going to work together to put Vice President Kamala Harris in the White House as the next President of the United States of America. All right. We had a great time in Chicago at the DNC. We're having a great time here in Savannah. But none of this means anything if we don't show up and we don't show out at the polls in November. When we fight, let's get to work. God bless you.
That is Mayor Van R. Johnson from Savannah, Georgia, before a raucous crowd inside the in-market arena. Capacity 8,500, by the way. Now, that's seats. So when you throw in floor seats and you take away for some seats that probably were set aside for staging, no view, et cetera, and so on, you're probably looking at 8,000, 9,000. Don't know what the guesstimate is. Here's what I do know. I do have some numbers that should be pretty eye-popping for folks who are kind of curious what voter turnout will look like in, what did he say, 68, 67 days. Okay, so we're at 67 days. How about the change in voter registration numbers? And by change, I mean the spike in registration and who is registering to vote since Kamala Harris became the nominee. We will dive into those numbers when the Ron Show returns on the America One Radio app, AmericaOneRadio.com, Progressive Voices via TuneIn, or wherever you podcast. A little bit later on the Ron Show, we will go over the game film, the Dana Bash interview with Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. First things first, let me share a little anecdotal nugget. I got to enjoy lunch with my dad yesterday. He lives about an hour from where I'm staying, and we don't get to catch up very often. He is dealing with, I think he said stage 3 congenital heart failure. I never knew there were stages, but anyway, he's ticking right along, man. Still doing well. When he got that diagnosis years ago that he had congenital heart failure, everything I read, everything he said or knew was like year and a half. But I mean, he's a tough old guy. Anyway, good to see him. We had taco salads because I had leftovers from the night before when we made what we call walking tacos. Have you heard of those? Good stuff. My friend Angie loves a good walking taco. So we made walking tacos. That was my gift to them for them letting me stay at the lake house at the Plum Branch Yacht Club here in McCormick County, South Carolina. So, my dad and I, we don't talk a whole lot of politics because, well, we probably don't see eye to eye on a whole lot. My dad is that kind of voter that, I mean, listen, he's a 76-year-old white guy who has lived in the South most of his life, and he hunts and he works hard. He hangs out with people who go home and they get their Fox News indoctrination. I've walked into the house a few times in the past few years, and Fox News has been on in his house too. It is what it is. And I actually tried to have a conversation with him yesterday, and he just, sometimes folks just shut down. I don't want to talk about it. I said, but do you not kind of dig the Tim Walz guy? I mean, that's they call him the REI candidate. Get it? And he didn't get it. But I said, this guy hunts, he fishes, he's a football coach. There's a lot you can like about that guy. And he really didn't want to talk about Tim Walz. He wanted to talk about, what did he call it? Oh my gosh, my dad. The laughing hyena. That's what we're up against. The good news is, I love my dad. The good news is we are seeing a spike in voter registration that's going to mitigate that. Mark Nisi, Phoebe Quinton at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution reporting that new voters have registered in droves in Georgia. We've seen this nationwide, but in Georgia specifically, they write, since Kamala Harris entered the presidential race, especially Black, Hispanic, and young voters, according to state election data. The sharp increase in the rate of registration suggests outpouring of enthusiasm among voters who tend to vote for Democratic candidates in Georgia. A politically divided battleground that could decide the winner between Harris and Republican former President Donald Trump. Black women led the surge, with a 75% jump in registrations compared with the same 3.5-week period in 2020, according to the most recent voter registration data available from the Georgia Secretary of State's office, stretching from July 21st to August 13th. Signups for Hispanic voters grew by an even larger percentage, 114% over the 2020 period. Though the raw number of new registrations was lower than other racial groups because there are fewer Hispanic voters overall in the state. And then they gave us a nice graphic. And new voters under 30 years old spiked by 76%. Overall, 50% more voters have registered since July 21st than in the same period 4 years ago. It's shocking. I did not expect to see something of this scope, said Tom Bonnier, CEO of Democratic data firm TargetSmart. This has the potential to be a game changer in terms of the presidential race, Bonnier said. His research also found similar leaps in 13 other states since Harris joined the race, and he said Georgia's growth in registration reinforces an emerging national trend. More than 46,000 people have registered since July 21st, bringing Georgia's total number of voters to 8.1 million. So far this year, 226,000 new voters have registered in the state. Now, I don't want us to go getting cocky or getting ahead of ourselves. We got a foot on the gas, right? I'm going to go into some more football analogies when we go into the Dana Bash interview, by the way, so be ready for that. Scrolling down the article here, white voters who are more likely to back Republican candidates in Georgia also showed growth in voter registration, but at a lower rate than Black and Hispanic voters. By the way, can I just say anecdotally, inside the blue bubble, that isn't necessarily a bad thing anyway, having more white voters register. I know this because, again, this is just anecdotal. This is just my little sphere. This is just folks that I know and interact with. I, too, have seen this same jump in enthusiasm since President Joe Biden announced that he would not be seeking re-election and that Kamala Harris was getting his endorsement and would become the presumptive nominee once she spent like 24 hours kind of shoring that up. I, too, saw a spike in enthusiasm. So amongst those white voters that are registering is the Atlanta gay white male contingent. So think of that what you will. There is the college-educated white individual that inside the city of Atlanta or in Metro Atlanta, Metro Augusta, Metro Columbus, Metro Savannah, or Kamala Harris, you're going to see some of that actually showing for Kamala Harris in early November. Now, we can't also just assume that all of the Black and Hispanic registrants are going to be siding with Kamala Harris. That can't not just be the assumption. Going to have some of those new registrants, I would assume, perhaps voting for Donald Trump. Although, I have to think, if there's a spike, and you can see the date, you can see where the spike began. If there's a spike of such a magnitude, at such a pivotal point in this election cycle, well, you have to assume the overwhelming majority, 90, 95%, 97%, Black, Hispanic voters of color, you have to think, women, you have to think that that's due to enthusiasm for Kamala Harris. Oh, there's also another batch to consider here. Over 9,600 registrations, according to the article, are pending because the voters signed up when they were 17 and a half years old, which is allowed in Georgia. They aren't eligible to cast a ballot until they turn 18. I want to go back to the graphic, and I'm going to give you the link in the show notes at ronshowatl.com. Okay, yes, they do. They show breakdowns between male and female, white men, white women, black women, Hispanic men, Asian women, Asian men. Women are leading the way as well, and that is, I think, a tell. All right, so we're going to go over the game film, kids. Head to the locker room. We've got game film to go over here. The Dana Bash interview, the one-on-one, the one-on-two, with Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. We will break down the game film. What went right, what went wrong, what can be addressed, what still needs to be addressed. When the Ron Show returns on the America One Radio app, AmericaOneRadio.com, Progressive Voices via TuneIn or wherever you podcast.
Broadcasting 5 days a week to make common sense common again. This is The Ron Show on America One Radio.
Listen, there are going to be those who are going to tell you that the Dana Bash, Kamala Harris, Tim Walz interview was either wildly successful for the Harris-Walz ticket or, oh my gosh, what a dumpster fire. She didn't answer anything. She gave us nothing of substance. You're going to hear that from the left, from the right. I'm going to try and give you the actual, I think, the reality of the aftermath of the CNN Dana Bash interview with Vice President Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, governor of Minnesota. It was a do no harm effect. I don't think there was anything groundbreaking that was said, but I also don't think this is where the football analogy comes in. So if you're not a sportsy person, I apologize. This is where when you've got the ball and you've got the lead, although it's a slim lead, but you've got the ball and you've got the lead and it's late in the game, that instead of getting conservative with your play calling, that you keep your foot on the gas, you keep going. You've got the ball, you've got the lead. Keep going for the end zone. You keep trying to score. You don't just rest. You don't say, you know what? We need to kind of be a little more conservative about this, not throw the ball around so much when that's what's gotten you the lead. That's what got you where you are. You go on the horse you rode in on, right? It reminds me of the Falcons' most recent Super Bowl debacle. They were up 28-3, remember? We all know that. And as I think it was 28-17, a little bit of a comeback from the Patriots. The Atlanta Falcons play calling on offense got conservative. They had the ball. They were inside the 50. They just needed a field goal. And instead, they sort of started backing away from what got them there. They stopped throwing the ball around a lot. And they decided, let's just run the ball. And they ran the ball and got stuffed. University of Georgia football fans can remember the first era of the Mike Bobo offensive coordinator role. See, I'm getting too sportsy here. I know that. But do humor me here. There would be those moments in a game where the offense is just humming along, just scoring at will. And you get to a point in the game, maybe it's like just before halftime, and you're at the 50 and you could tack on another field goal or maybe another touchdown. And instead you decide, let's just kind of play it conservative. Let's not try and ruin the lead that we have or cough up any. So we're not going to throw the ball. You're worried about an interception, something like that. And so you decide to just run the ball and play it conservative. And lo and behold, you get stopped and they call timeouts and they've got time left on the clock by the time you have to punt the ball back to them. And they in turn do what you didn't do. They get that last-minute field goal before halftime or that last-minute touchdown, and momentum changes. The score changes. Yeah, I felt the Dana Bash interview last night was a do-no-harm scenario, a situation where the Harris-Walz team feels like they've got the lead or at least the momentum, but don't want to cough up the ball, don't want to do anything to swing momentum against them. And so I felt like in that sit-down interview, which, by the way, was really short, it was like 18 minutes, with a lot of fluff built in around it. It was a half-hour show, but it was only an 18-minute interview. Is that all you had time for? I felt like Vice President Harris and Governor Walz were a little tight with their answers. let's dive in. Let's go through the game film. Here we go.
The voters are really eager to hear what your plans are. If you are elected, what would you do on day one in the White House?
Well, there are a number of things. I will tell you, first and foremost, one of my highest priorities is to do what we can to support and strengthen the middle class. When I look at the aspirations, the goals, the ambitions of the American people, I think that people are ready for a new way forward, in a way that generations of Americans have been fueled by hope and by optimism. I think, sadly, in the last decade, we have had in the former president someone who has really been pushing an agenda and an environment that is about diminishing the character and the strength of who we are as Americans, really dividing our nation, and I think people are ready to turn the page on that.
So what would you do day one?
Thank you. Dana Bash says, okay, the platitudes, that's cute, but I only have 18 minutes apparently, so let's get to the specifics. Yes, let's get to the specifics.
Day one, it's going to be about, one, implementing my plan for what I call an opportunity economy. I've already laid out a number of proposals in that regard, which include what we're going to do to bring down the cost of everyday goods, what we're going to do to invest in America's small businesses, what we're going to do to invest in families, for example, extending the child tax credit to $6,000 for families for the first year of their child's life, to help them buy a car seat, to help them buy baby clothes, a crib. There's the work that we're going to do that is about investing in the American family around affordable housing, a big issue in our country right now. So there are a number of things on day one.
Much better answer, much more succinct. Thank you, ma'am. Then Dana Bash pivots to the wallflower for the moment. I'm sorry, the Walz flower. Damn it, I missed an opportunity. And says,
What about you?
Well, I'm excited about this agenda, too. As I said, the idea of inspiring America to what can be. And I think many of these things that the vice president's proposing are things that we share in values. And the child tax credit is one we know that reduces childhood poverty by a third. We did it in Minnesota. To have a federal partner in this, unbelievable, I think, in the impact that we can make.
I don't want you to think, by the way, that I'm like mocking Tim Walz. I'm kind of mocking the right-wing trope, the narrative that leading up to this interview. Why, if she's such a strong woman, why does she have to do a joint interview with her vice presidential candidate? Well, first of all, that's just it's a time-honored tradition, for crying out loud. Trump Pence did it. Trump Vance just did it, for crying out loud. Obama Biden, that's what they do. McCain Palin, for God's sakes. Meghan McCain had been on social media all this week railing on the joint appearance. Hello. Sarah Palin sat right there alongside your father, ma'am, and did a joint interview almost immediately after becoming the nominee for the office of vice president, and thankfully never the vice president. By the way, Governor Walz's answer, I thought, lacking in specificity, but I also think aware that he needs to not overshadow the vice president in this moment.
You talked about, you call it the opportunity economy. Yeah. You are well aware that right now many Americans are struggling. There's a crisis of affordability. Yeah. One of your campaign themes is we're not going back. But I wonder what you say to voters who do want to go back when it comes to the economy specifically, because their groceries were less expensive, housing was more affordable when Donald Trump was president.
Well, let's start with the fact that when Joe Biden and I came in office, during the height of a pandemic, we saw over 10 million jobs were lost. People, literally, we were all tracking the numbers. Hundreds of people a day were dying because of COVID. The economy had crashed. In large part, all of that because of mismanagement by Donald Trump of that crisis. When we came in, our highest priority was to do what we could to rescue America. And today, we know that we have inflation at under 3%. A lot of our policies have led to the reality that America recovered faster than any wealthy nation around the world. But you are right. Prices, in particular for groceries, are still too high. The American people know it, I know it. Which is why my agenda includes what we need to do to bring down the price of groceries. For example, dealing with an issue like price gouging.
Which brings me to this article. I don't know if you've heard about this. Georgia McKee reporting during a recent antitrust trial, Andy Groff, Kroger's senior director for pricing, admitted that the company raised the prices of essential items like eggs and milk beyond the inflation rate. The acknowledgement came while he was testifying before a Federal Trade Commission attorney, revealing a strategy to increase prices above normal inflationary adjustment. The question is that price gouging? And what could a federal government do about price gouging? There exists in many cases laws, especially in the face of like hurricanes, when you're evacuating and hotels jack prices up to ridiculous amounts, knowing that they've got a captive audience, almost a captive audience, fleeing a place like Florida or Southeast Louisiana. We've seen that happen a time or two where price gouging occurs and governors swoop in and do something about it. At the federal level, how do you prove that a corporation is price gouging? And honestly, good luck getting any bill passed through the House and Senate that addresses it when Congress is so bought off by corporations in the first place. I'm not trying to crap on the idea as much as I'm trying to say what we need is a sea change in politics. We need to have a blue wave, a blue tsunami, the likes of which, and honestly, it needs to be more progressive driven anyway, because some Democrats, they too like the big checks from the corporate donors. I mean, two names come to mind, Joe Manchin, Kyrsten Sinema, both of whom no longer, I guess, Democrats officially, and I guess at some point in time, if you're Kamala Harris and you're running for president, and I think that's a popular idea, dealing with price gouging, I really do. I think that's a popular idea, but you also have to turn to the American people and say, but you got to do your part too.
What we need to do to extend the child tax credit to help young families be able to take care of their children in their most formative years. What we need to do to bring down the cost of housing. My proposal includes what would be a tax credit of $25,000 for first-time home buyers, so they can just have enough to put a down payment on a home, which is part of the American dream and their aspiration, but do it in a way that allows them to actually get on the path to achieving that goal and that dream.
And by the way, speaking of price gouging, you have to ensure that the folks that are selling the homes don't just jack their prices up because they know that $25,000 tax credit's out there.
So you have been vice president for 3.5 years.
Yeah.
The steps that you're talking about now, why haven't you done them already?
Absolutely love the question. I'm going to go ahead and let you know now. I do not like the answer.
Well, first of all, we had to recover as an economy, and we have done that. I'm very proud of the work that we have done that has brought inflation down to less than 3%. The work that we have done to cap the cost of insulin at $35 a month for seniors. Donald Trump said he was going to do a number of things, including allowing Medicare to negotiate drug prices. Never happened. We did it.
Okay, honestly, a different subject altogether, and it's something to point out later on. Maybe put a pin in it and say, you know what? These were such popular ideas and accomplishments that Donald Trump is bragging that he accomplished them when we actually did. But anyway, this doesn't answer the question about accomplishing things that you say you want to accomplish in your first term that you haven't been able to accomplish as vice president.
So now, as I travel in the state of Georgia and around our country, the number of seniors that have benefited. I was in Nevada recently, a grandmother who showed me her receipts. And before we capped the cost of insulin for seniors at $35 a month, she was paying hundreds of dollars, up to thousands of dollars a month for her insulin. She's not doing that any longer.
You maintain Bidenomics is a success.
I maintain that when we do the work of bringing down prescription medication for the American people, including capping the cost of the annual cost of prescription medication for seniors at $2,000, when we do what we did in the first year of being in office to extend the child tax credit so that we cut child poverty in America by over 50%, when we do what we have done to invest in the American people and bringing manufacturing back to the United States so that we created over 800,000 new manufacturing jobs, bringing business back to America, what we have done to improve the supply chain so we're not relying on foreign governments to supply American families with their basic needs, I'll say that that's good work. There's more to do, but that's good work.
Okay, this is where the football speak comes in. Okay, that's defending your record. That's not stating why you couldn't accomplish in the last 3.5 years the to-do list that you have for the next 4. And my quibble with this is, how about pointing out that there are There are two parties in governance in this country, and that one is a party of obstructionism. Not once did she mention the GOP-held House and its absolutely crazy batch of Congress people. Marjorie Taylor Greene, Matt Gaetz, Jim Jordan. I mean, come on. Let's go on offense a little bit. The GOP-held House has done nothing for the last 2 years, so 2 of the last 3.5 years, you can almost wipe off the books there. What could you get accomplished with that? Also, the filibuster in the Senate. Again, you don't have to name drop Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema, but it's not hard to point out, by the way, we've got an evenly split Senate and a GOP-controlled House. What can we possibly get done with that? That's why we need down-ballot success as well as winning back the White House. That's just something I would have said. You got to point out to your opponents, you got to give them credit for being the obstructionists that they are. I say credit loosely. I'm saying you need to blame them, but still, tip your hat. Hey, GOP-controlled House, filibuster in the Senate. They're not letting us get a lot done. That's why we need more folks in the House and Senate. When you're atop the ticket, that's part of your job too.
I want to get some clarity on where you stand on some key policy issues. Energy is a big one. When you were in Congress, you supported the Green New Deal. And in 2019, you said, quote, "There is no question I'm in favor of banning fracking." Fracking, as you know, is a pretty big issue, particularly in your must-win state of Pennsylvania.
Sure.
Do you still want to ban fracking?
No, and I made that clear on the debate stage in 2020, that I would not ban fracking. As vice president, I did not ban fracking. As president, I will not ban fracking.
This reminds me of the ethanol divide that gripped this country politically for so long. Because Iowa was always the first state on the primary map, everybody would go there and just gloat about ethanol and corn this and corn that, knowing that corn is A, not good for us, and B, ethanol is not the answer when it comes to future fuel needs. But still, everybody had to go to Iowa and say, oh, yes, I'm for ethanol. This is not a dissimilar scenario and a blind spot that I think most politicians are going to fumble because Pennsylvania is a swing state and they want to win Pennsylvania. So they're going to say, oh, I'm not going to ban fracking. There are people in Pennsylvania who are against fracking too, by the way. Dana Bash even gave her the opportunity to sort of address the switch in policy position.
In 2019, I believe, in a town hall, you said you were asked, would you commit to implementing a federal ban on fracking on your first day in office? And you said, there's no question I'm in favor of banning fracking. So yes. So it changed in that campaign?
In 2020, I made very clear where I stand. We are in 2024, and I've not changed that position, nor will I going forward. I kept my word, and I will keep my word.
What made you change that position at the time?
Well, let's be clear. My values have not changed. I believe it is very important that we take seriously what we must do to guard against what is a clear crisis in terms of the climate. And to do that, we can do what we have accomplished thus far. The Inflation Reduction Act, what we have done to invest, by my calculation, over probably $1 trillion over the next 10 years, investing in a clean energy economy. What we've already done, creating over 300,000 new clean energy jobs. That tells me, from my experience as vice president, we can do it without banning fracking. In fact, Dana, I cast the tie-breaking vote that actually increased leases for fracking as vice president. So I'm very clear about where I stand.
And was there some policy or scientific data that you saw that you said, oh, okay, I get it now?
What I have seen is that we can grow and we can increase a thriving clean energy economy without banning fracking.
Okay.
So this is where you could have said something along the lines of, no, I just realized it's not a zero-sum game. We have to pick our battles. And in the fight to address climate change, fracking is the lesser of the many evils we need to address first. And then you're not just slamming the door on the idea of banning fracking for those who are actually for banning fracking. Back after this. All right, final 5 minutes or so of the Ron Show, and I'm running a little light on time, and I got about 8 minutes of Dana Bash, Kamala, and Tim to squeeze into that. So let's dive right back on into the game film and nitpick a little bit.
As vice president, you were tasked with addressing the root causes of migration in southern countries and
Northern part of Central America.
The northern part of Central America that affects the southern border of the U.S. Mm-hmm. During the Biden-Harris administration, there were record numbers of illegal border crossings. Why did the Biden-Harris administration wait 3.5 years to implement sweeping asylum restrictions?
Again, the answer was to play it safe instead of to go on the offensive. Well, the GOP-controlled House and the filibustered Senate, and oh, by the way, they would rather take photo ops at the border than actually get something done. Do you see how little time that took and how much of a sharp barb it was at the opposition? Instead, we got...
Well, first of all, the root causes work that I did as vice president, that I was asked to do by the president, has actually resulted in a number of benefits, including historic investments by American businesses in that region. The number of immigrants coming from that region has actually reduced since we began that work.
That is fair for her to point out, by the way.
Joe Biden and I and our administration worked with members of the United States Congress on an immigration issue that is very significant to the American people and to our security, which is the border. And through bipartisan work, including some of the most conservative members of the United States Congress, a bill was crafted, which we supported, which I support. And Donald Trump got word of this bill that would have contributed to securing our border. And because he believes that it would not have helped him politically, he told his folks in Congress, don't put it forward. He killed the bill, a border security bill that would have put 1,500 more agents on the border. And let me tell you something, the Border Patrol endorsed the bill. And I'm sure in large part because they knew they were working around the clock and 1,500 more agents would help them. That bill would have allowed us to increase seizures of fentanyl. Ask any community in America that has been devastated by fentanyl what passing that bill would have done to address their concern and a pain that they've experienced.
But to answer the 3.5-year question, Vice President Harris, President Joe Biden asked for such a bipartisan bill that would pass both chambers of the House and that he could sign within his first 2 months in office. In fact, in his first joint address to Congress, he asked for such a bill. And it was Republicans in Congress who refused to give him that bill. That's how you answer the 3.5-year question.
So you would push that legislation again. I just want to ask
about... Not only push it, I will make sure that it comes to my desk and I would sign it.
Just one other question about something that you said in 2019 when you first ran. There was a debate. You raised your hand when asked whether or not the border should be decriminalized. Do you still believe that?
I believe there should be consequence. We have laws that have to be followed and enforced that address and deal with people who cross our border illegally, and there should be consequence. And let's be clear, in this race, I'm the only person who has prosecuted transnational criminal organizations who traffic in guns, drugs, and human beings. I'm the only person in this race who actually served a border state as Attorney General to enforce our laws, and I would enforce our laws as president going forward. I recognize the problem.
So there was a little back and forth about whether or not the voters can trust Kamala because she's changed her, I guess, position on policy in a couple of metrics. Meanwhile, the right is having a complete meltdown within themselves because Donald Trump is against a 6-week abortion ban. But here, Dana Bash is concerned about Kamala Harris having evolved positions on fracking, for crying out loud. I'm not going to sit here and give Dana Bash a pass because that's the same Dana Bash who sat there kind of stargazed while Donald Trump spouted dozens of lies in the first and only debate with Joe Biden in this election cycle.
I want to ask you about your opponent, Donald Trump.
Okay.
I was a little bit surprised. People might be surprised to hear that you have never interacted with him, met him face to face. That's going to change soon. But what I want to ask you about is what he said last month. He suggested that you happened to turn black recently for political purposes, questioning a core part of your identity.
Yeah.
Any?
Same old tired playbook. Next question, please.
That's it?
That's it.
Okay. Let's talk about some foreign policy issues that would be on your plate if you become commander-in-chief. President Biden has tried unsuccessfully to end the war between Israel and Hamas in Gaza. He's been doing it for months and months, along with you. Would you do anything differently? For example, would you withhold some U.S. weapons shipments to Israel? That's what a lot of people on the progressive left want you to do.
Let me be very clear. I'm unequivocal and unwavering in my commitment to Israel's defense and its ability to defend itself. And that's not going to change. But let's take a step back. October 7, 1,200 people were massacred. Many young people who were simply attending a music festival. Women were horribly raped. As I said then, I say today, Israel has a right to defend itself. We would. And how it does so matters. Far too many innocent Palestinians have been killed. And we have got to get a deal done. We were in Doha. We have to get a deal done. This war must end.
And in the meantime,
and we must get a deal that is about getting the hostages out. I've met with the families of the American hostages. Let's get the hostages out. Let's get the ceasefire done.
but no change in policy in terms of arms and so forth.
No, we have to get a deal done. Dana, we have to get a deal done. When you look at the significance of this to the families, to the people who are living in that region, a deal is not only the right thing to do to end this war, but will unlock so much of what must happen next. I remain committed since I've been on October 8 to what we must do to work toward a two-state solution, where Israel is secure and in equal measure, the Palestinians have security and self-determination and dignity.
All right. So you know what? There's an opportunity for me to say, see, I'm not crapping on the entire Q&A with Dana Bash. I thought that was actually a good response, a cogent response. And while it may not please those hardcore one way or the other, the hardcore pro-Netanyahu, pro-Israeli, U.S. flex their muscle, give the Israelis all they want military so they can flex their muscle, anti-Islamic faction. It also doesn't just completely kowtow to the folks that are protesting for a two-state solution, a free Palestine, et cetera, and so on. There has to be some sort of a coexistence, and there has obviously been no measure of that, particularly going backwards under Netanyahu's watch. I don't want you to think that I'm just crapping on the entire interview, though. I thought that was a cogent, intelligent response, as actually was Kamala addressing the fact that she was not a border czar. Dana didn't really dive into the border czar situation, but she did point out that Kamala was tasked with dealing with the Northern Triangle of Central America, and Kamala Harris got to point out her successes in that. All right, let's fast forward now. I want to get to some of Tim Walz. I didn't think he really handled this whole weapons of war thing very well, if I'm being honest.
Governor Walz, the country is just starting to get to know you. I want to ask you a question about how you've described your service in the National Guard. You said that you carried weapons in war, but you have never deployed actually in a war zone. A campaign official said that you misspoke. Did you?
Well, first of all, I'm incredibly proud. I've done 24 years of wearing the uniform of this country. Equally proud of my service in a public school classroom, whether it's Congress or the governor. My record speaks for itself, but I think people are coming to get to know me. I speak like they do. I speak candidly. I wear my emotions on my sleeves, and I speak especially passionately about our children being shot in schools and around guns. So I think people know me. They know who I am. They know where my heart is. And again, my record has been out there for over 40 years to speak for itself.
And the idea that you said that you were in war. Yeah. Did you misspeak, as the campaign has said?
Yeah, I said we were talking about, in this case, this was after a school shooting, the ideas of carrying these weapons of war. And my wife, the English teacher, told me my grammar is not always correct.
My dude, I absolutely love you. You were the guy that I picked. But the thing I love about you most is that you're not that typical politician. You don't give the typical politically dance around the facts, tell the just blunt, honest truth. That was a political answer, and you're not a political type. At least that's not the vibe that I've gotten from you to this point. Just say, yeah, you know what? I misspoke. I got caught up in the heat of the moment. I'm railing on the need for gun legislation, and I just kind of got carried away. See how easy that is?
But again, if it's not this, it's an attack on my children for showing love for me, or it's an attack on my dog. I'm not going to do that. And the one thing I'll never do is I'll never demean another member's service in any way. I never have, and I never will.
One other question, because again, this is all new.
Yeah.
This was not, however many days ago, this was not on either of your bingo cards, especially yours. You had to clarify that you had said that you and your wife used IVF, but it turned out you used a different kind of fertility in order to have children. And then when you ran for Congress in 2006, your campaign repeatedly made false statements about a 1995 arrest for drunk and reckless driving. What do you say to voters who aren't sure whether they can take you at your word?
Well, I've been very public. I think they can see my students come out, former folks I've served with, and they vouch for me. I certainly own my mistakes when I make them.
Boy, he did not pause. He just kept on going, but he really could have stopped and let that idea marinate. Yes, I own my mistakes. How refreshing. This gets back to him not being your average textbook politician. Yes, more of that, sir.
The one thing I'll tell you is I wished in this country wouldn't have to do this. I spoke about our infertility issues because it's hell, and families know this. And I spoke about the treatments that were available to us that had those beautiful children there. That's quite a contrast in folks that are trying to take those rights away from us. And so I think people know who I am. They know that record. They've seen that. I've taught thousands of students. I've been out there. And I won't apologize for speaking passionately, whether it's guns in schools or protecting of reproductive rights. The contrast could not be clearer between what we're running against. The vice president's position on this has been clear. And I think most Americans get it if you've been through that. I don't think they're cutting hairs on IVF or IUI. I think what they're cutting hairs on is an abortion ban and the ability to be able to deny families the chance to have a beautiful child.
And that was pretty much it for Tim Walz on this primetime 9 p.m. showing of the Harris-Walz interview with Dana Bash. Dana and CNN took a break and came back, and Dana wanted to focus in on Kamala Harris and did she cover for Joe Biden when Joe Biden was showing signs of decline? And again, feeding into a right-wing narrative. Dana, feeding into a lot of these right-wing tropes. For me, if I'm Kamala, I would have said, did you see that NATO press conference? Did he seem like he lacked specificity or the ability, cognitive ability? He owned that NATO press conference. That would have been my answer, but let's listen to how she responded.
Vice President Harris, you were a very staunch defender of President Biden's capacity to serve another 4 years. Right after the debate, you insisted that President Biden is extraordinarily strong. Given where we are now, do you have any regrets about what you told the American people?
No, not at all. Not at all. I have served with President Biden for almost 4 years now, and I'll tell you, it's one of the greatest honors of my career, truly. He cares so deeply about the American people. He is so smart and loyal to the American people. And I have spent hours upon hours with him, be it in the Oval Office or the Situation Room. He has the intelligence, the commitment, and the judgment and disposition that I think the American people rightly deserve in their president. By contrast, the former president has none of that. And so, one, I am so proud to have served as vice president to Joe Biden. And two, I am so proud to be running with Tim Walz for president of the United States and to bring America what I believe the American people deserve, which is a new way forward, and turn the page on the last decade of what I believe has been contrary to where the spirit of our country really lies.
But the last decade, of course, the last 3.5 years has been part of your administration.
And I feel like Kamala Harris answered somewhat like, you know what I'm talking about.
I'm talking about an era that started about a decade ago, where there is some suggestion, warped I believe it to be, that the measure of the strength of a leader is based on who you beat down, instead of where I believe most Americans are, which is to believe that the true measure of the strength of a leader is based on who you lift up. That's what's at stake as much as any other detail that we could discuss in this election.
Because we haven't had a chance to talk, I'm just curious, staying on President Biden, when he called you and said he was pulling out of the race, what was that like? And did he offer to endorse you right away, or did you ask for it?
This may have been my actually favorite part of the entire night, watching this part of the Q&A, because Kamala got to talk about how she's making bacon and her niece wanted some more, et cetera. Anyway, I thought this was a pretty nice little tableau.
It was a Sunday, so here, I'll give you a little too much information.
Go for it. There's no such thing, Madam Vice President.
My family was staying with us, and including my baby nieces, and we had just had pancakes and, Auntie, can I have more bacon? Yes, I'll make you more bacon. And then we were sitting down to do a puzzle. And the phone rang, and it was Joe Biden. And he told me what he had decided to do. And I asked him, "Are you sure?" And he said yes. And that's how I learned about it.
Now, the right has us all believing, it was a coup. The woman was at home making pancakes and extra bacon for her nieces. Some coup.
And what about the endorsement? Did you ask for it?
He was very clear that he was going to support me.
So when he called to tell you, he said, "I'm pulling out of the race and I'm going to support you."
Well, my first thought was not about me, to be honest with you. My first thought was about him, to be honest. I think history is going to show a number of things about Joe Biden's presidency. I think history is going to show that in so many ways it was transformative, be it on what we have accomplished around finally investing in America's infrastructure, investing in new economies, in new industries, what we have done to bring our allies back together and have confidence in who we are as America and grow that alliance, what we have done to stand true to our principles, including the one of the most important international rules and norms, which is the importance of sovereignty and territorial integrity. And I think history is going to show not only has Joe Biden led an administration that has achieved those extraordinary successes, but the character of the man is one that he has been in his life and career, including as a president, quite selfless and puts the American people first.
Up until recently, I would have questioned Kamala Harris's genuine nature, but the more you see of her, the TikTok videos of her cooking and sharing cooking tips and dancing, I think that's legitimately her. And I also think that she has legitimate respect for Joe Biden and a lot of admiration as well. And I think that answer really shows a lot of that. All right, here we are in the home stretch.
I just have to ask you both about two standout moments, aside, of course, from the addresses that you both gave, but standout moments that were perhaps unexpected during the convention. You mentioned one of them, Governor. A moment that you shared, that the world shared with your son, Gus. You were speaking, the camera caught him, so incredibly proud of you, so emotional, saying, "That's my dad."
Yeah, I don't know as a father I could have ever imagined that. I'm grateful for so many reasons to be on this ticket, but that moment, to understand what was really important, to have my son feel a sense of pride in me, that I was trying to do the right thing. And it was, you try and protect your kids, it brings notoriety and things, but it was just such a visceral, emotional moment that I'm grateful I got to experience it, and I'm so proud of him. I'm proud of him. I'm proud of Hope. I'm proud of Gwen. She's a wonderful mother, and these are great kids. And I think the one thing is talking about the era we're in is our politics can be better. It can be different. We can show some of these things, and we can have families involved in this. And I hope that I hope people felt that out there, and I hope they hug their kids a little tighter, because you just never know, and life can be kind of hard.
And last question, Madam Vice President, the photograph that has gone viral. You were speaking, one of your grandnieces that you were just talking about was watching you accept the nomination. You didn't explicitly talk about gender or race in your speech, but it obviously means a lot to a lot of people, and that viral picture really says it. What does it mean to you?
I am running because I believe that I am the best person to do this job at this moment. For all Americans, regardless of race and gender. But I did see that photograph, and I was deeply touched by it. And you're right, it's the back of her head, her two little braids, and then I'm in the front of the photograph, obviously speaking. And it's very humbling. It's very humbling in many ways.
Did she talk to you about it afterwards?
Oh, she had a lot to talk about. She had a lot. She listened to everything, and she listens to everything.
Give you your hot takes?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Madam Vice President, Governor Walz, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
for having
Thank you,
us.
Dana. Thank you.
So again, going back to my football analogy, I feel like the team I'm rooting for got the ball. They just got the lead, and they just kind of played it conservative. They kind of did a do no harm in this entire interview. I mean, that's okay. That's fine. But I'm more foot on the gas. We got to score again. There's no lead too large. That's the Atlanta Falcon fan in me, honestly, because there really was no lead too large in that Super Bowl. That's just kind of how I felt about it. And I also really just felt like Dana Bash. She was the one sort of on the offensive a little bit, and then when I feel like she wasn't getting the answer she wanted, she just kind of cozied in a little bit and got a little soft toward the end there. Not much lost there, not much gained, but maybe that's okay. Me personally, I would have liked a little bit more disarming of the right-wing tropes, the attack on Tim Walz service and the weapons of war stuff. Maybe a little more zeroing in on the border czar stuff and inflation, and et cetera, and so on, and tying Trump to it, because a lot of that is tied to Trump. Anyway, that's going to do it for The Ron Show. I want to thank you for listening on Progressive Voices via TuneIn over the weekend. We do this show weekdays, 7 to 8 p.m. on Progressive Voices via TuneIn. Show notes, as always, we have them there for you at ronshowatl.com. From Atlanta, I'm Ron Roberts. Thank you for listening to The Ron Show. Have a great weekend.